I want to talk to you guys about the end of Pax Americana, really the end of America's global hegemony. Now, I remember back in the day when it really meant something to be an American. If you were to go to a different country, people would say, "Oh, where are you from?" "Oh, I'm from America." "Oh, you're from America. Oh, which part?" "Nueva York, San Francisco." And you would go to Asia. "Oh, American. Oh, you have lots of American money. Lots of American money. You have lots of money. Big car, big wallet. Yeah, yeah." And you don't really have that sort of status anymore because America's global power is declining. And why is it declining? Well, it's really America's fault why America is declining. People like to blame other countries. They'll say, "Oh, Russia's the big bad boogeyman out there. Oh, it's these evil terrorists. Oh, Bashar al-Assad. Oh my God, evil dictators. Blah, 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 blah. Oh, it's the economy, the American economy." And that has played a role, don't get me wrong. But I must emphasize that it is America's disastrous policies that have led to the world just hating America. And in that regard, you can't blame it on the economy. People, you could bring up the economy as a factor for America's decline, but as far as the world just despising the United States, that is the fault of the United States. You look at what happened in Iraq, a million Iraqis dead. You look at what happened and what's still happening in Syria, literally hundreds of thousands of people killed in a civil war that was sparked by a revolution that was facilitated by the United States. You look at Libya. I mean, Libya, give me a break. In school, we were told about slavery. We were told about how they were putting Africans on slave ships and selling them, auctioning them like cattle. And in the 21st century, nobody was expecting to see videos of Africans in cages. Nobody expected to see that. And then we saw it as a result of what? The toppling of Muammar Gaddafi, which was facilitated by NATO, which was done by NATO. And Gaddafi, and then we found out, wait a second, Gaddafi was actually protecting the sub-Saharan Africans in Libya. Because there was a lot of racism against sub-Saharan Africans in Libya. Gaddafi was protecting them. He was protecting them, and then America comes along and says, "Well, who cares about that? Overthrow Gaddafi." And then for the first time in our lives, we saw video footage of African people in cages. And these monsters in Libya, they were enabled, they were emboldened by what? The overthrowing of Gaddafi. So the world saw this horror. The world saw the horror of Iraq, the horror of Syria, the horror of Libya. And now the world is looking at Gaza, and they're saying tens of thousands of people have been killed by Israel's bombardment, 15,000 children butchered by Israel, and you, America, can put a stop to this. You, America, can end it, but you are not ending it. Why? Because your neck is leashed by your Zionist masters. This is the rhetoric that has become extremely popular, and you can see this in Twitter/X. The world is changing, everyone. It's not like the world that we knew when 9/11 happened, when everybody was still reading the newspaper. It's not like today when you can just pick up your phone, go onto Twitter, and you can see a whole bunch of information that contradicts the narrative that is given to you by the government. We're not living in that world anymore. America does not have the privilege and the convenience of just saying what it wants and its subjects believing what it says. We're not living in that era anymore. And so nowadays, Alex Jones is more trusted than the mainstream media. I remember when I was in high school hearing about Alex Jones, and Alex Jones was just this object for entertainment. People thought he was funny. People would listen to him for entertainment value. People thought he was just hilarious. And now you have people looking at Alex Jones as a serious political commentator. Why? Because many times he actually makes more sense than the official narrative. And so back in when 9/11 happened, America just said, yeah, it was Saddam Hussein, and people were just so ecstatic to see the shock and awe in Iraq. They were ecstatic to see the bombing of Iraq because in their minds, in their eyes, they were seeing justice because they saw the Twin Towers get hit. They saw the Twin Towers fall. They heard about people being slaughtered in the buildings, people dying in the billows of smoke. They heard about firefighters dying as they were trying to rescue Americans, and so they wanted justice. They thirsted for justice. And you can't blame the American people for wanting justice at that point. And you can't blame people for just believing the narrative at that time, because at that time, that's what was to be believed, right? It was presented to them as the truth. Their government had the facts, and they accepted it, and they had their knee-jerk reaction. But then we heard about the rise of terrorism in Iraq. We heard about terrorists being backed. We heard about civilians being butchered. We heard about U.S. soldiers butchering civilians and getting away with it. We heard about all these horrors. We heard about 1 million people in Iraq being killed as a result of America's war. And we heard about how Saddam Hussein had absolutely nothing to do with 9/11. And we realized that we were manipulated. We realized that we were lied to. And so the world can't trust America. The American people cannot trust America. And so what does this mean? It means America is declining. If people cannot trust you, how can you maintain a hegemony, a global hegemony, if people not only not trust you, but also despise you? And that's the reality of America right now. Pax Americana is declining. And we are seeing right now, we are witnessing, we are bearing witness to the beginning stages of the decline of the American empire. And I want to read to you guys an excerpt from a book that I started reading. It's called The Battle for Syria by Christopher Phillips. I just started reading this book. I don't know if the camera's picking this up. There we go. Battle for Syria. There you go. Battle for Syria. And the book definitely is biased for NATO. I can already tell that it's going to be critical of Russia, but that shouldn't stop one from reading a book, because when you read a book that has points that disagree with your position, it actually helps you because you understand the other side more. You understand the position of those who disagree with you better, and you have a clearer understanding of what they're saying. And when you find points of agreement in a book that disagrees with you, then when you are having a debate with someone who disagrees with you, you can say, well, wait a second, this author who is on your side actually has information that contradicts your position. So it's actually quite helpful to read books that have points that you disagree with. So it says here that the regional political environment has been a key factor in Syria's civil war. On its eve, the Middle East was undergoing profound change. The perceived Pax Americana of U.S. dominance over the region after the Cold War was coming undone. The failures of the 2003 to 2011 occupation of Iraq, the decreasing importance of Gulf oil, economic and military retrenchment following the 2008 financial crisis, and the election of Barack Obama, who criticized his predecessor's military adventures, all prompted a reluctance in Washington to continue the active hegemony in the past. And what has America been doing? America has been trying to cloud people's vision. America does not want to give the impression that it is declining, that it is a declining power. And this is the reason why America has been supporting Ukraine. It's to show Russia, look, Russia, we can still project military prowess. We're still going to send weapons to other people to kill you. We're not declining. We're still strong. But it is declining. So you see, this book was written it was published in 2016. 2016 was the year of the rise of Donald Trump. Well, the world saw his rise in 2015, but his election was in 2016. Donald Trump rose to the office in 2016. And what was that an indication of? It was a sign that America's global hegemony was declining. Why? Because Donald Trump presented himself as an isolationist, and I believe that Donald Trump is sincerely an isolationist, because you can go back to the past and you can see past statements in which he expressed isolationist views. The fact that Donald Trump was very popular, and the fact that he won the presidency really showed that Americans are tired of globalism. They are tired of internationalism, and this contributes to the popularity of Alex Jones. What is the term that Alex Jones has been using for so many decades? The globalist. The globalist. And now the term globalist as a pejorative is mainstream. Now you have people in the mainstream saying, oh, globalist, globalist, globalist. It has become just a common household term that Americans use when talking about their disdain for internationalism. So, like I said, the world is changing dramatically. It is shifting dramatically from a unipolar world to a multipolar world where countries are pursuing their own autonomy, and they're realizing, or they have already realized, that they cannot fully trust in the United States. And we have seen numerous signs of that. The book talks about how Saudi Arabia had this trust for America and asked America for certain favors, and they have seen how America cannot be 100% relied upon. Saudi Arabia right now is terrified of Iran, terrified of Turkey. Turkey has been involved in Africa. Turkey has been involved in Somalia, in Sudan. These are African countries that are right across from Saudi Arabia. So you have a rising Turkey active in Africa, and the Arabs are absolutely horrified. They do not want to see the rise or the revival of the Ottoman Empire. Back in World War I, the Arabs, with the help of the British, overthrew Ottoman power in the Arab Peninsula. The Turks have never forgotten this. They want their revenge. The Arabs are terrified. The Iranians also hate the Arabs. Saudi Arabia is this Sunni power within the Middle East. It is a regional power in the Middle East. It has a powerful air force. And the Iranians do not want to, they no longer want to see this Sunni power being maintained within the Middle East. The Iranians hate the Arabs. Partially it's because of religion, partially it's also because of culture and history. The Arabs invaded Iran back in the early days of Islam, and they butchered the Persians so much so that there was actually a whole river of blood within Iran, and the Arabs, according to the Hadith at least, the Arabs had to build some sort of a drainage to drain out all the blood from all the people that they butchered. I mean, it was pretty horrendous. So there's been a long history of Persian Arab violence, and the Iranians they hate the Arabs, and they plan on to eventually just destroy Saudi Arabia. So the Arabs are terrified of a rising Iran. They can't really fully rely on the Americans. And that's the reason why Israel and Saudi Arabia actually normalized relations. And people were actually just shocked by this. I mean, they were absolutely shocked by this. The Arabs making an alliance with their arch enemy, the Jews. Yes, because in the Middle East, there is a country, as far as the Arabs are concerned, there is a country that is far more dangerous than Israel, and that is Iran, and also Turkey. So the Arabs, the fact that they normalized relations with the Jews, the fact that they're so terrified of Iran, these are all just signs that they do not have a sense of security. That sense of security is supposed to come from the United States, but it's going down. It is gradually disintegrating. And so the book talks about how America does not want to give this impression that it is a declining power. And the book says, however, it, meaning American hegemony, no longer enjoys the perceived hegemony of the 1990s and 2000s, and regional actors and Russia have vied to increase their influence. Yet the breakdown of an old system and the emergence of their influence and the emergence of a new one does not happen overnight, etc., etc. Importantly, the U.S. still has been perceived by many Middle Eastern actors to be hegemonic, while Washington has understandably not sought to promote the reality that it is less dominant than before. This misperception has impacted some states' policies, with allies such as Saudi Arabia repeatedly urging the U.S. to be more active and growing disillusioned with Washington when it refused. So there you have it. There you have it. The decline of Pax Americana. And so before I started filming this video, recording this video, I looked into into Google News to see Google News and also Russian news to see if there were any articles that recently talked about this phenomena, and I was not disappointed. There was an article that was published a couple of weeks ago by the Atlantic Council, And it talks about how there is this divergence between the EU and America because America wants other countries to buy American weapons. As long as other countries are buying American weapons, that means projection of American global power. Look, the world is buying our weapons. We have the biggest guns. We have the biggest bombs. We got the best stuff, the best weaponry. So that is a way of intimidating the world, intimidating other countries. Look, we are so great at empire. We have such great weaponry that other people are buying our weapons to protect their own countries from NATO's enemies. So as long as other countries are purchasing American weapons, American military technology, that means that America can continue to project its global hegemony. But the EU right now has been working immensely on building its own military industry infrastructure. It's working on building its own military industrial complex, which means a decline in America's power projection in Europe, which means the decline of American power over Europe and ultimately over Germany, because what happened after World War II, the EU is a result, it is a direct result of America's victory in World War II. With the defeat of Nazi Germany came the occupation of Germany by the United States, and that's why there are so many soldiers, literally tens of thousands of American soldiers in Germany right now, because Germany is still being occupied by the Americans. The Germans, a lot of Germans are sick and tired of this. They don't want this anymore. And a lot of Europeans are tired of America having this leverage over the European Union. So the EU and Germany, which really leads the EU because Germany is the biggest economy, the EU is working on building its own military industry. It wants to be independent of America's military industrial complex. And so there was an article talking about this on the Atlantic Council, and I'll just read to you guys some excerpts from the article. It says here, while the U.S. strategy emphasizes cooperation with allies and partners, the EU strategy is looking to break dependence on U.S. military hardware. To do so, it seeks to establish a new European defense industry program aimed at boosting weapons production on the continent. The National Defense Strategy explicitly states the need to maintain military superiority and deter U.S. adversaries from challenging a free and open order. This aligns closely with Pax Americana. So here it's talking about America's National Defense Strategy and how it really needs to maintain military superiority, and it does so by one of the ways that it does this is by selling military technology and military weapons. So it goes on to say, this aligns closely with Pax Americana, a term that identifies the United States as the global security guarantor and superpower. Europe, on the other hand, seems motivated by the desire to increase its autonomy. For years, a few European leaders have periodically bandied about the idea of strategic autonomy in the sense of building up both the capability and the will to act independently from the United States or another major power. For just as long, however, little has come of this idea. Nonetheless, the impulse toward greater European autonomy, even if short of full autonomy, has proved remarkably resilient. This impulse shows up, for example, in the European Defense Industrial Strategy, specifically when it comes to the dependency on U.S. military hardware. The strategy makes it a priority to eliminate excessive external dependencies or bottlenecks from the industrial base. So in other words, the Europeans are saying, we're sick and tired of being dependent on America for security, sick and tired of being dependent on America for weapons. We got to build our own weapons, and we have to take care of our own security, which means the rise of Europe, which really means the rise of a pan-European military bloc led by Germany, because Germany is the biggest economy in the EU. It has the most money. It controls really the currency of the European Union. It controls the other members of the EU. Yanis Varoufakis talks about how he could not even get a meeting with Emmanuel Macron because the Germans said, no, that meeting can't happen. So there is a tremendous amount of power that Germany has within the European Union. Germany is beginning to project this power. And we're seeing this with the pursuit of autonomy, with the pursuit of independence when it comes to security and military technology. And eventually, what's going to happen in the future is that there's going to be a revived German power, and it's going to have its European auxiliaries, kind of like how the Third Reich had SS members from various other European countries, SS members from Albania, or Albanian SS members from Romania, SS members from France, SS members from Scandinavia, and we're seeing the rise in this European power. An example of this can be seen in Scandinavia, where the Nordic countries have agreed to unite their air forces, which means that if this plan comes to fruition, the air forces of Sweden, Denmark, Norway, Finland will be just one giant air force, which means that if this plan comes to fruition, you will be seeing a massive Scandinavian air force right next to Russia. And really, what this goes to show is that a Russian-European conflict is inevitable. So in the future, we're going to be seeing a major pan-European bloc, and it's going to be led by Germany. So we're going to be seeing basically a Fourth Reich. It's pretty surreal. We're living in a very surreal world, everybody. Now, there was another article that I saw. It was published by DZen. This is a Russian media outlet. And it talked about how the head of European diplomacy, Josep Borrell, he made a statement about the decline in American power. And this statement was quoted by the Italian newspaper Il Fatto Quotidiano. It says here that we see more conflict and less cooperation, more polarity and less versatility. The international system we were accustomed to after the Cold War no longer exists. Over the past decade, America has lost its status as the undisputed hegemon, and the multilateral order that emerged after 1945 is losing its position. The Italian newspaper emphasizes, and this is from the article DZen, the Italian newspaper emphasizes that these are not the words of Chinese President Xi Jinping, who was the first to hope for the birth of a new multipolar world order. These are not even the words of Vladimir Putin, his friend. These statements were made to Oxford students by the head of European diplomacy, the one who, together with the leaders of the 27 member states, dictates the EU's foreign policy line, High Representative Josep Borrell. And Borrell goes on to say China has risen to the status of a superpower, rivaling the United States and Europe not only in production but also in military power and in creating the technologies that shape our future. And limitless friendship with Russia signals growing support for authoritarian regimes. At the same time, middle powers such as India, Brazil, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, or Turkey are becoming important players on the world stage. So the EU knows that Turkey is rising as a regional power. That's why the Arabs are terrified. That's why the Syrians are terrified. That's why you see the Turkish military in the northern part of Syria. That's why you see Russia in Syria. It's to counter against the rise of Turkey, which is the second most armed country in NATO. It's a serious NATO. It's a serious part of NATO, and therefore it's a serious threat to Russia. And Russia taking control of the Crimea is also strategically important for the Russians against Turkey, because Turkey is a Black Sea country. It is a neighbor of Ukraine, and Turkey is right across from Crimea. And the Turks and the Russians are vying over the Black Sea, which means that NATO and Russia are vying over the Black Sea. And so Russia being right there in Crimea is a further check against Turkish power in the Black Sea. It is really a preemptively done strategic advancement against Turkey. When Russia took over Crimea back in 2014, that was a preemptively done strategic action against Turkish power in the Black Sea. So Mr. Borrell goes on to say they have little in common other than the desire for higher status and a stronger voice in the world, as well as greater benefits for their own development. To achieve this, they maximize their autonomy, balance their bets, and don't take sides. And Borrell also brought up Gaza. What is happening now in the Gaza Strip has created an image of Europe that many simply do not understand. They have seen our resolve against Russia and are wondering how we will deal with Palestine. There is a perception that we value civilian lives more in Eastern Europe than in the Gaza Strip, where more than 34,000 people have been killed and children are starving. And we are thought to care less than when UN Security Council resolutions are violated by Israel, as they continually do when settlements are built and Palestinians are driven from their lands with increasing levels of violence than when international law is violated by Russia. And he is making a legitimate point here because we see violations of human rights going on in the West Bank. I was reading an article today that was published by Haaretz, and it talked about how entire Palestinian communities have been purged out of existence by Jewish extremists, by Jewish far-right settlers. They come into a Palestinian area, they push people out, and there was a raid in a Palestinian village a number of weeks ago. It was in the village, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this correctly, but it was in the village, I believe it's called Al-Mughayr. In the village of Al-Mughayr, the settlers raided the village and they chased people out. People ran out of their homes because of this. They were lighting homes on fire, burning people's cars. They were shooting at people. They even murdered one man. Uh, the settlers came into one man's land. They stole all of his sheep. His livelihood gone because of these psychopaths. And who supports the settlers? It's the Israeli government. Who supports the Israeli government? It's the United States. And so the world is looking at America and saying, America, you're supposed to be in charge. Why aren't you stopping this? And the world has lost respect for the United States. And what Borrell is saying here, and this ties into something else, and this is not talked about at all, really, but Borrell is saying that we as Europe must take a stand in regards to Gaza. We have to project foreign policy, our own foreign policy in the Middle East, and that means going against Israel. And there's a quote that I want to share with you guys. This was from a few years ago. Josep Borrell said, "The European Union has to learn to use the language of power." So he wants Europe to project its own military power on other countries. And Josep Borrell went on to say, "We should reinforce the Euro international role and further our military capacity to act." So Josep Borrell has this grand vision, and this grand vision reflects what the EU wants to do for the future. The EU wants to become a military power that can project its own power on other countries. The EU wants to have the ability to conduct its own foreign policy, just like the United States conducts its own foreign policy. And there is a woman within the European think tank world. Her last name is Asseberg. Miss Asseberg is considered to be the main thinker for German policy in regards to the Middle East. She is considered to be the foremost expert on the Middle East within Germany's think tank world. And Asseberg wants to see Europe more involved, wants to see Germany more involved in the Middle East. And she has talked about how Germany needs to reinforce the law in our southern neighbor. And she uses this term, southern neighbor. And what does she mean by southern neighbor? She's talking about the Middle East. That includes Israel. And she went so far as to say that Germany must be involved in other countries to the point of going to other countries and taking political leaders who are considered to be dictators, considered to be despots and tyrants, and taking them to justice. Because she said that the International Criminal Court is not really doing its job. It doesn't really have enough power and leverage to actually impose the law on governments that violate international law. So she says that Germany must take a stand and should be involved in taking political leaders who are considered to be dictators and taking them to justice. And she considers Netanyahu to be not a dictator, but Netanyahu to be a tyrant. And a lot of people consider Netanyahu to be a tyrant. And if Borrell is saying, look, America is not doing anything about Gaza, Europe must project its own power through military strength. What does that mean? Uh, what does that mean as far as Europe and Israel go? What does that mean? What that means, I believe, is that the Europeans, especially Germany, they want to be involved in the Middle East, and that could come to the point when you will see European, German troops in Israel. And I'm not saying that this is 100% going to happen, but this could actually mean European involvement in the destruction of Israel. Because the Turks want to destroy Israel, Iran wants to destroy Israel, and you have Europeans who are saying we need to do something against Israel, and that means projecting our military strength. Well, that could mean that in the future, when we see Turkey doing a blitzkrieg on Israel, that European militaries will be involved to help Turkey as an ally. Not saying that that will happen 100%, but I'm saying that it is, from what I'm looking at here, from the rhetoric that I'm seeing here, it's possible that we could see another destruction of the Jewish people with European involvement in that destruction. Anyway, we are seeing the end of Pax Americana. And with the end of Pax Americana, you will see regional powers vying for territory, rising up as new empires, and new empires will be born. And what happens when new empires are born? You have war. So there's nothing much we can really do. We have to tend to our own garden. Anyway, you guys just heard some theology. God bless.